Hi, and welcome to the Common Creative Podcast. My name is Paul Fairweather.
And I'm Chris Meredith, and we're on a mission to unlock the secrets of creativity in business and beyond through ideas, stories, and of course, visual cognition and imagery. And we have got, I think, a superb guest who teaches us so much about not just imagery, but I think broadly the value of creativity.
Well, you're 100% right, Chris. But we did not use the word creativity once in a half-hour interview, which is probably a world record for both of us in any conversation any day. But look, Shantanu Starick is our guest. He's a photographer. He's grew up in northern New South Wales, lived in Brisbane for some time, but he now lives in Ireland and he travels the world as an architectural photographer. Now, I met him after I was an architect, but and he did a project for me, which we'll talk about during the interview. But a very interesting fellow, like probably one of the most unusual career moves and approaches I've ever heard of.
Yes.
So we won't spoil it because we want to get him to tell us about it.
But the message is the value of creativity, that he's found a way of helping people to value what he does. So yeah, listen in. It's a fascinating.
And it really is. And he's very laid back. But certainly incredibly creative and brave at the time and incredibly innovative, but without using the word creativity.
Yes.
Let's get him in. Shantanu, welcome to the Common Creative Podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Shantanu, great to meet you. Very excited to hear about photography as well as your other projects.
Shantanu, we're going to kick off as we do with all our guests and ask you to give us a quick 60-second potted history of the turning points in your life from getting you where you were to where you are now.
I would have to say, if I had to choose some of the most influential parts of my life, one was when I started to study architecture in Brisbane, and I was a student of architecture working with Donovan Hill Architects. And I was also a photographer, not of anything specific, but I became their in-house photographer for a few years while I was studying. I got a mentor from that. Timothy Hill became a mentor of mine through not just architecture. In fact, very little about architecture, more about photography and life, which then led to me doing a project called The Pixel Trade, where I traveled around the world trading photography for life's basic necessities. And I did that for 3.5 years, and that changed my life so profoundly that even to this day, there's behavioral outcomes from that project that I haven't immediately identified came from that time. But every so often I go, I think that came from the Pixel Trade, even though it finished 10 years ago. And then I'd say the last thing that has influenced my life is falling in love with an Irish woman and ending up living in a country that is so deeply challenging to my warmth and cold levels that I grew up with in Brisbane. But has, again, had a profound impact on my life. So I'd say that's the nice 60-second little summary of the greatest impacts.
Fantastic. Now, you're a professional photographer now, and I remember the story that you told me. So for our listeners, I met Shantanu when he came and stayed in my studio and spent a few days with myself and my family to do a little video project, because you were doing photography and videography at the time, which is a brilliant little piece, a little project called Treasure House. But I remember you saying that you decided to do the pixel trade because you didn't want to be a photographer and ruin your passion by mudding it with money. So you did this project. And look, if I'm right, did you meet your wife as part of that process? And I think the story was that you wanted to ask her out to dinner, but you had no money, because you never dealt with money for those 3.5 years. And I know that I introduced you to a friend of mine in LA, and I'm not quite sure if you did a project with her, but I know she offered for you to stay, and you said, no, I can't stay because I'm not doing the project, so I'm going to stay on a homeless shelter, which I believe you did. So I think it was absolutely remarkable what you did. So I just wanted to sort of flesh that out a little bit. And tell us some of the things that, profoundly changed your life.
Well, I think the relationship to money is probably the biggest one. And now I'm never going to sit there and say money is a stupid thing or anything like that. But when money becomes the only language of exchange, it kind of crowds out every other kind of transaction that you can have. And it's not an accident. Like reciprocity and specificity, they've been like engineered out of money by design. That's the function. It's supposed to be frictionless, it's supposed to be universal. And going through the Pixel Trade, I started to have a disconnect from that system because I wasn't using it. And it was bizarre because I was functioning in a world that still used it. But my interaction with the people was more friendship based, because friendships generally aren't built around money. And so one of the big insights I got was how valuable the other types of, I could call them languages, the other types of language of exchange are, and what they bring. And they bring deep connection. After 3.5 years of living like that, I ended up with incredible friendships around the world, which were only built off interactions that were about 24 hours long and sometimes, 3 days long. And that's pretty profound, to be able to build deep connection in such a short period of time in so many different parts of the world.
So, Shantanu, for those of us who do use money, is it possible? Are those deep connections only possible if you chuck out money and you say, I need to explore the world without money, and I know the benefit of that is deep connection. Is there a way of stealing some of that insight and still having a wallet in your pocket?
100%. I live with both now. That was going the extreme the other way doesn't work either. There was a lot of kind of downsides to the way that I did it, and I did it during my kind of mid-20s. So it was also appropriate for where I was in my life to do that. I think we know that monocultures are fragile. We know that with crops, with bacteria. It's biodiversity, it's diversity, not bio, but diversity it allows us to dip into lots of different things. I think money is fantastic for certain interactions, but if we let it define every interaction, it doesn't work. It's like if you just worked all the time and you just made money all the time, you lose out on the interactions of friendships and family and things that don't involve.
Yeah.
So I think the pixel trade was extreme, and it wasn't about proving a point. It was just an extreme example that I was able to live through and embody. And I came out of that completely burnt out. I was wrecked, and it had as many downsides as it did upsides. So yeah, I think it's just staying away from the monoculture of anything. I mean,
I think our listeners and me included, tell us more about the Pixel project. I mean, we've got the idea it was a project to trade pixels for presumably accommodation, travel, food, those kind of things, and you didn't interact with money. But how did it work in practice? I mean, you arrive in a city, maybe it's a place where you don't know people. What do? Walk up to a stranger and say, hey, I need a roof tonight. Can I take your photo? What actually happened?
So Pixel Trade was born from solving a number of problems that I had. One, I didn't have a name as a photographer. I had grown a bit disenchanted by the industry of architecture instead of the practice of architecture. So I solved a number of problems of how do I just get away from architecture for a moment and focus on photography without having a name in the industry. And it kind of, skipping a few points, it kind of led to the idea of, why don't I travel to all 7 continents of the world without using money, and rather exchanging it for food, shelter, and transport, the 3 necessities that I really needed. And the one other guideline that I had in there was that if I didn't have a trade to move on to, the person that I was with or the company that I was with would have to find me in the next trade. So the idea was to kind of set up this timeline where I had the trajectory of where I was going to be in the days coming or the weeks coming, or eventually in months. I would book out months in advance once I was a few years into the project. And so a typical trade was a 3-day trade, maybe. I would arrive on the first day and I drank the most insane amount of alcohol during the entire project, because you'd arrive, be like almost like an occasion. They'd be like, wow, welcome. This is amazing to have you here. Why don't we take you out to dinner? Let's have something lovely to drink. And then tomorrow we'll do the photo shoot. And then so we did that, and the photo shoot would then be, a success. So we would celebrate and we would, go out and drink, and, the best wine was coming out. And then on the 3rd day was supposed to be my editing day, but more often than not, the people that I was with would take me to see the area that they lived in. We would go do an activity, and they would say, it's your last night. Oh my God, we need to celebrate. Let's drink, let's ease. And then just repeat that now, trade after trade, year after year. And that's how the interactions happened. That's how my life was.
How did people, I mean, it sounds like your reputation for some great photography kind of really was the oil that turned those wheels, or was it really the story that got people interested? Here's a person trying to see the world in a very different way. How did people react to it, the ones that weren't initially connected to you?
I really like that you noticed those 2 things. It was probably almost half. amount of people that just wanted to be part of the project, to kind of celebrate the idea of it. The quality of my work, I think it took a good chunk of the project to actually build that. I had some work there, but the idea was the website was going to be very important because it was the display of the other work that I was actually doing. Very quickly, the diversity of the work came and was the forefront of people, lots of different people being able to approach me because they felt like you could shoot our wedding, you could come and photograph our farm and our animals, you could come to this tech company in New York and photograph our studio. It was so diverse. And so it took a bit of time, I think, before there was a trust in what the project was. And then from that point, there was a real mix of why people wanted to be involved, for sure.
Shantanu, 2 questions. How many projects did you do in that 3.5-year period?
So I've recorded 222 unique trades, and I say unique trades as a way of just being very German about it and needing to have that chronological system in my head. But I did a lot of repeat trades, so people that I had done a trade with before, I would go back and do it again and again. So an example of that might be Annisfield Winery in New Zealand had a lovely restaurant attached to them at the time, and they got a book deal with Penguin to produce a book that was related to the winemaking and also the restaurant. And they flew me back for a year. They flew me back each season, so all 4 seasons, to shoot the next part of the book. So that was like a repeat trade.
Right. And so what were the big ones? So they flew you back. Was it hard to get a fare to the States or from the States across to Europe, or by that time it didn't really matter? People were just happy to do that.
Well, amazingly, the States came up quite early. So initially I thought I needed to create a project that had a buzz around it so that eventually I could approach an airline and they would then fly me to another country based on a trade that I did with them. But I think within the first month of doing the pixel trade, and I was in Melbourne at that time, I had an old client call me up and they said, look, we're looking to expand into the US. Can you come and do a shoot over there? I said, I can, but you can't pay me. And so they essentially booked the flight for me. And I said, this is really important. I said, I don't know anyone really in the US. So once we do our shoot, you need to find me the next person to photograph. And also, can you make the return ticket 3 months? So I'd be in the US for 3 months and then fly back on that same trade.
Right.
So they did. And that opened up the US, I think by the 3rd or 4th month. I can't remember now exactly, but so I was suddenly like, oh, I don't need to create a buzz around this to get to airlines. In fact, people are happy to take care of that part of the trade. I initially thought I wanted to keep it pure, only get clothing from clothing companies, only get flights from airlines. But then I realized that wasn't the important part, because we now no longer interacted around like how much I was costing them based on my fees, but more, we can just get him over here and then he can just shoot and do everything for us for as long as we just provide.
One of the things, I think Chris was sort of going there before, you're talking about, you sort of live in both worlds now, and that whole importance of, what you learned about, this connection with people rather than this frictionless transaction that money brings. Like, I suppose for our listeners, or mere, people like, who do very little trading, like how can we bring that into our daily lives, even if we are still trading money? Like, what's the secret? How do we make it more about a connection with person when we're doing a project for them rather than just exchange of money and a service?
I couldn't speak as to how people should do it. I can tell you some examples of how I do it.
Yes, well, that's what I'm not doing.
In a way, sorry, yeah, of course, that's what you were asking. As a way of integrating back into, let's call it everyday life, I look at when I'm in a financially stable position where I can start to reduce my fees for certain people, especially people who are starting companies or opening up restaurants. And I look at where I can reduce my fees for those people and have half fee and half trade basis and on that interaction. So there would be 3 restaurants in Dublin that I have a permanent ongoing half trade. They pay me a smaller reduced fee, and in exchange I can go in there and eat and drink whenever I like, which I obviously don't overdo. And we always say that too, that if this ever feels like it's tipping in the wrong way, that we need to be very open about it. And so what that does is we've straight away created a different type of relationship with each other, because they're like, oh, it's just a small fee. Great. Let's get that done. And now, isn't it fun every time you come in, we have to tell the staff that weren't there before what the deal is with you. And you come in. And same with like friends of mine who have a bakery. I kind of go in there and I'm like, so I don't pay for this in the money sense. I just take photos and they're kind of looking around, looking for the manager, and it always works out. So that's kind of one way of doing it. There's another project that I wanted to touch on, because I think it really was born from the similar mentality, is the Therefore books that I'm working on, which is they're these architectural books where each volume looks at one project and does a deep dive into it. And the way that I've set that relationship up is that I'll go and photograph for the architects, and I won't charge anything, no transport, no nothing. I'll go photograph their project, and then I'll take those photos and I will put them into a layout of a book, and then I'll sit down with the architect and we'll go through each photo as though that's the question for the architect to answer. And they answer that becomes the written part of the book. I send that off to the printers, and we now have a book that an audience can purchase. So I've now taken the transactional element away from myself and the architect, and as well as the owners of the project are now part of this other type of publication. And that has made me feel incredibly great, because now there's people who are interested in the work who actually then slightly fund it. It kind of breaks even, and that's the whole point. It's not about making money and that. But my interaction, my relationships now with new architects are starting on the basis of working with each other and not for each other.
Great. So you get the proceeds from the book, obviously, but as you say,
The proceeds of the book would, barely cover the cost here to the project, but it kind of washes its face, and that's enough for me.
Yeah, okay, that's great. And obviously going back to the fact that you studied to be an architect, and you obviously still have a love of it. So what other stuff
Appreciation.
What sort of stuff do you do otherwise, your commercial work, where you are getting full tilt, full commissions? So what, are you still doing weddings or buildings, or you're doing everything, or what are you doing?
No, so that kind of, the diversity of my work fizzled out after the pixel trade. It still took a few years, but I kind of started to see which things I enjoyed and which things I wasn't enjoying anymore. So primarily, I'm an architectural photographer. That is 90% of my work. And very quietly, off to the side, because we know that architects are kind of fussy. They just want architectural photographers. They don't want someone who's in general. So I only show that. I only really publicly show that side of my work. And then the other 10% is my deep appreciation and love for chefs and restaurants and people in the food world. So I've worked on a number of cookbooks. I photograph restaurants, and I photograph with chefs very closely as the other part of the work that I do as well. That's commissioned. Yeah.
I'd love to hear a bit more about photography. I think the first question is, if people are feeling inspired about a new way of building wealth, not in the financial sense, let's say, is it essential to be a photographer? Could you be a poet, a painter, a writer, a dancer? You said your photography, you're very versatile. Your portfolio has got a lot of different genres, which I'm sure is a big help. But to what extent is it help that you're a photographer, or could you do it with other creative outlets?
You could definitely do it with other creative outlets. So I think photography is, part of the reason why I do it is because it really is just a passport into almost any world you want to go into. Because almost any profession, any industry has a visual side to it, and photographs are of use to them. And I've realized very quickly that if I don't enjoy the shoot, not based on the subject matter, but based on the interaction with the people, I very quickly don't want them to be a repeat client, because it's not fulfilling this other part that I really enjoy. Photography is the tool that I have that allows me to interact and to learn and to be curious about life. So if we're thinking about other professions being able to be so diverse, one of the things that came up, just let's go back to the pixel trades idea for a moment. We were thinking, well, who else could do this? And some of the kind of the quicker ones that would come to mind would be graphic designers and chefs, imagine you just buy the food and you've got this person that you're putting up for a few days and they make these beautiful meals. They could suddenly go anywhere in the world. They could dip into hotels if they wanted for a week, or they could go into people's homes. So that, again, is another profession that I think opens up that world quite easily. Even just a base level of people wanting to improve their homes in a way that's what could we do in this place? You could now get designers and architects and interior designers involved in that kind of idea. So I think photography is lucky because almost every industry can use that medium.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is, I do think would be very similar, but I think photography is particularly lucky in that sense. And so it's videography, very similar realm.
One of the other things, particularly about digital photography, is it's so fast. And one of the prompts for me taking up photography was that having a young family, you don't get 3 days for a creative project. You might get 3 minutes or 3 hours. And so you can kind of do stuff quickly and achieve quick results. So I'm guessing that's really important. If you travel to a new country and I need some photographs within 1 or 2 days, you can say, well, here they are. And that you deliver quickly. I guess it suits that need as well. What about your creative style? How would you describe your approach to photography? I mean, architectural photography there's a visual language that I think people would know. But what about you? What's your style?
That's kind of one of those questions that other people need to answer, because they can identify my style. I find it difficult because it's more the approach that I have. Like if I was talking with Timothy about it, I remember him saying one day, he said, "Sean, you know Ansel Adams." And as you always do when Timothy drops a statement like that, you just wait to see what comes next.
Something coming.
And his point is that he's like, you're never looking for this hero shot, as the industry likes to call it. You go in and you gather. You're like a researcher. You go in and you gather, and it's very different to going in and just like shooting everything. You go in and you kind of like, oh, that's interesting, and you grab it and that and that and that, and you get, and then a lot of your work happens after, when you start to put the narrative together of the project. Because you've now gone and got all the research, and now you want to put it all together into and present that this is my experience of the project, of being with the architect or being by myself in a place. So that's not a style answering question. That's just more of like how I go into a project, which is very different to some other photographers and very similar to photographers. I really admire the photographers that go in and they set these shit, over an hour-long time. I would lose my mind taking that number set.
So would I.
Because it's not how I interact with the environment. I like to kind of go, that's interesting. I'm going to try and maybe I need to go a bit further back. I just constantly, that's how I shoot. And that's why I think the books that I've been working on are really, really appropriate for the way that I work, is because I get to kind of do that and then bring it all together into a small book form and present all of these little moments as an experience, and then have the architect talk or speak alongside that experience.
I wish there were a different word for photographer, because it implies so much about kind of technology and using this complicated, well, maybe it's not complicated, but a bit of technology. And there's assumption, because I have a camera on my phone, that there's a commonality between that person taking shots and you. And it's interesting that I love that description. I'm a gatherer. I'm kind of harvesting personal insights and sharing them as a story. It's not about the camera at all. And that's, I suppose, a hallmark of many of the great photographers. It's not about that machine you carry around. It's the way you see.
Absolutely. And to the point, when it comes to personal things, I used to get grief from my partner and their family. They're like, why aren't you taking photos of this Christmas event or this thing that we're doing? Well, I don't photograph personal things. The only thing I do more often with personal moments is I have a little Instax camera and I take the shot and it comes out and it's finished and there's no more interaction with it.
Yeah.
I think that people use phones and things for personal moments, but I have an allergy to that. I can't share it. My work is the photography side of things and I enjoy that so much. But if a friend says, can you just take a few shots of my wedding? If I do, I'm completely leaving my realm of our personal interaction. I'm completely going into the world of photography, which I'm happy to know that I'm not going to be here as your pal. I'm here now.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a really good answer, isn't it?
But look, I would just make an observation from having the experience of Pixel Trade of you coming in and doing a video and some photographs whilst you were doing this particular little project, and some of it involved the kids. And I can see how this would have translated over the years to the way you approach buildings. You end up getting these sort of like peripheral snippet shots because you had a camera in your hand of my kids, which was fantastic, of them drawing, or Camille was playing a little thing, which wasn't really part of the script. But there's one particular image. We have these big folding doors that open up into the house. And Nicholas was about, I don't know, he might have been 3 or 4 at the time, maybe 5. And he was in the lounge room, and this bird flew in. And Nicholas, and it's the only time a bird has ever flown into the house. And it sort of interacted with it, and you caught it, So I can imagine, the way that you described approaching buildings, I can sort of see how that has transitioned, So, you're not looking for that hero shot, but you're sort of almost capturing the spirit of the building is sort of how I would sort of describe it. I could well imagine. But yeah, so I might actually see if I can get some of those images and put them up in the show notes.
I'd love to see that.
But there's an image of
on a hard drive somewhere.
Yeah, no, look, but I think I still have the Treater House video. We should put that up as your image. Shantanu, unbelievable. We're actually almost out of time. We always ask for one tip, and I don't know where this is. It's up to you whether it's someone who wants to be a photographer, or someone who wants to totally change their life or do something. I don't know. Like, you pick one thing. What's one bit of advice? You've had a mentor for many years. If you were mentoring somebody in life or business or photography, give us one tip for our audience.
God, my head goes to so many different places. I'll pick one. Was really shit at photography when I started it, but I didn't know it because of the people who just kept positively reinforcing whatever I was sending them. They were, "This is what a fantastic story." And it's one thing that I have definitely needed to work on, is to, instead of being so judgmental about the quality of the work, is the value of just supporting someone when they're trying something new out. And I see that now as being incredibly important. I wouldn't have done photography. I wouldn't have pursued.
That's a great one. That's a great piece of advice. We can call you Shan. Thank you so much for joining us from France. And Chris, you said that's probably that's not a backdrop, Chris. That's his backdrop.
Because I thought, if you're listening to this, there's a beautiful sunny sky, and it looks like a kind of Mediterranean or a Caribbean roof behind Shantanu.
French.
And I thought it was virtual, but no, it's not. It's a real heat.
Yeah, so Shantanu, thank you so much. It's been absolutely great to reconnect with you and to hear your
And same for me. It's been great to chat to you. Thank you, Shantanu.
Wow, Chris.
Well, it answers. What a show. I mean, I was fascinated to hear his story. As a fellow photographer, I had decided not to make money out of photography by earning money through my consultancy and my training and so on. But that twist, which is you can live a happy, fruitful life by bartering your creativity, it's so powerful, and it reflects that connection I think all creatives need, which is that you can't kind of work on something that you don't have a connection with, that you don't people you like and people who you respect. And in business, there's this kind of, it doesn't matter, they're clients, they pay the bill, you do what you like. And Shantanu's found a way around that, which is to kind of collaborate and share his work and receive what they do in return. It's truly inspiring, and the great answer to one of the worries that I have about the world getting more and more commercial and chasing money and growth at the expense of way too many other more important things.
Yeah, no, look, really fascinating. And I think we could have had a show of half an hour at least on his tips, because he must have learned so much, which we probably didn't draw out of him. And I was really surprised about that tip about, when he was not so good at photography, but in other people's, eyes, it was okay, but they encouraged him and it's something that we don't sort of talk about. And I think it was that sort of payback where he got encouraged and it changed his world. And that's the important thing of
it's a reminder about how fragile creativity is. And if the people around you don't support you and encourage you, you could shrink back and that's it. I can't draw. I can't take photographs. And that's where everybody ends up. So I agree. A really important tip that he shared at the end.
Yes, and look, and Chris, you and I, we love the encouragement from our audience. So we're pretty we're pretty crap at this, so please give us some encouragement by giving us 5 stars, and Shantanu and Chris giving us 5 stars.
Anyone giving us less than 5 stars gets shot on this particular show.
Because you're not encouraging us. It's
exactly.
Take a leaf out of Shantanu, or Shan as now we call him, book, and please encourage us. Encourage us by following us. Hit the follow button. That encourages us. So we'll keep doing that, as well as can also encourage us by telling your friends.
Tell your friends.
And
yes, spread the word about the Common Creative Podcast. We've got now over 200 shows. It's a wealth of insights for anybody that wants to get more creative, wants to learn about expressing themselves. So we do hope we'll see you for next week's show.